Hello, fellow curious creatives out there in podcast land. This is Mike Kepka coming to you from our home base just outside of Washington, D.C. Welcome to the show where we talk to other creatives and marketeers about the power of results-based video content and strategies. Today, we're lucky enough to have with us Joe Wolf, head of paid social at Optidge. Optidge is a full-service digital marketing agency specializing in performance-driven paid media campaigns that offer both creative development and data strategies that really move the needle for everyone they work for. Some of the best clients to date for Joe are the Telly Awards and the luxury men's jewelry brand Degs Sal. If you're a Bieber or a Brad Pitt fan, you know what I'm talking about. Joe, it's so good to have you on the show.
You're listening to The Curious Creative with your host and video expert, Mike Kepka.
Some of his biggest clients are the Telly Awards, Degs Sal, a luxury men's jewelry brand. If you're a Bieber fan or a Brad Pitt fan, you know what I'm talking about, guys. Today, he's going to tell us all about his magic when it comes to paid social media. Joe, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It is awesome to be here on the Curious Creative podcast. Really excited and looking forward to our conversation, especially with you having so much in-depth knowledge about highly produced videos.
Great. Well, we're going to tag on each other because my goal here is to actually, I've been pivoting my company to a results-based video strategy company in the last year. So that means we're taking the high-end content and then translating that into language that our clients can understand, which is return on investment, right?
Yes.
I would imagine that's sort of what you guys are all about. You're head of paid social, right? Describe your day-to-day and what that looks like.
Yeah, so I think you can probably put it into two buckets. So those two buckets would be pre-launch, so us getting ready for the launch of a campaign with a new client, and then ongoing and existing management for clients that we're already working with. So for like the pre-launch stuff, we're looking at like setting up initial meetings, diving deep into their business, their goals, and who their ideal customers are, doing research on customer avatars, looking at competitors' creative, auditing their historical data, and then most importantly, like looking through the creative assets and what they have available. And then for like those existing clients, really, we're coming up with both short-term and long-term plans. We're doing more of like reaction. So we're kind of optimizing, analyzing the campaigns, implementing new tests, coming up with creative development, trying to come up with like variations on stuff that's won or come up with completely new concepts. And really like the goal with those existing clients is just get their KPIs to continue to improve over time.
Now, how many people at Optidge do you have?
So we have like, 40 people with consultants, and then really like 25 to 30 people that are full-time.
And where do you come in on the start with the clients, right? What's the very first step Optidge does? And then are you evaluating what they've got in-house already? And tell me about, you said that you're not always working with the highest quality stuff. What's the challenge there?
Yeah, so it can totally range. So the first thing we do is we have a kickoff call. So that is really where we're getting, the foundation of everything. We're making sure that we understand their business and their customer avatars to a really high extent. So we'll go through a ton of different questions. We'll try to make sure we understand the pain points and solutions that they offer. And then once we have that meeting, they'll send over like all of their creative assets. And like you alluded to, sometimes they have like nothing and that ends up being a really big challenge. And then sometimes they have like on the very other end of the spectrum, just so much for us to go through. If we have some client that's like really, really into influencer marketing, they just have a ton of assets that we have to kind of go through. So it can be on both ends of the spectrum. Now, if we're looking at the ones where there's really not a ton to work with, we have to really, number one, go through and see what we can find on Shutterstock, for example. And then also game plan with them on stuff that they're going to be able to come up with, right? So sometimes they're limited in capacity, they're limited in budget. So that ends up being a big challenge. And we have to actually come up with some concepts on our own.
But that's not always a bad thing, right? You have a lot of user-generated stuff and, it's not always the slickest thing that sells the service or the product, right?
Yeah, exactly. So like, there's something that's called ugly ads. So you can try to just put something out there that's like even like a post-it note written with some like text on it that slides to some other things where you're kind of highlighting some of those pain points and solutions. You can really keep it kind of low key. But really the main thing is making sure that the client is like on the same page with you with whatever you're doing. So there is the approval process. They need to be on board with whatever you're working with, but that's really where you can get your hands dirty, and you can even come up with the ads yourself. So you could have, people in your own team filming stuff. We've done that a couple times. But yeah, it can end up being a blessing in disguise.
Now, when you sit down with them and who's developing the strategy? Are you part of that team, or is that somebody else?
Yeah, so I'm on every account that we work with, but the people on our team, we have a great team, and they're a lot of times like kind of driving the strategy. We usually staff like a creative strategist on the account, and they're kind of digesting everything, and they're kind of aligning it with the strategy itself. So like, for example, some of the clients will have like multiple goals. So we're working with a client called Mother's Market and Kitchen out of LA, and it's like something similar to Whole Foods and organic stuff. And they wanted to get a rewards program, they wanted to get online shopping program, and they wanted to get a reactivation of people who lapsed on their rewards program. So we had to come up with like 3 different buckets of creative. We had to come up with different pain points and solutions for all of those creatives, so they can end up having to come up with creative that aligns with the strategy. So a lot of it's dictated by the strategy, but then there's like the bigger components of you're just trying to get some creative that's going to really talk to the audience. So,
and do you have like a recipe? We're going to start out with 3 things here and see how that goes. Or, a lot of people want to know, how much deliverable they're going to get for their big retainer cost with you guys, I'm sure. Right. And I'm not sure the equation exactly is that. Is it more results, right? That's the goal.
Yeah. So I think really the way that we like to do it is try to get like the best assets to start. So we'll try to come up with like very different themes and concepts so that we're testing stuff out of the gate that isn't just like a variation on a color, for example. So what we'll start with is probably like, 10 assets, and then we'll actually launch with like 4 to 6. And then we'll like plan out in the next couple months, like what we're going to be working on. So like if we don't get all the concepts that we wanted to done in the first month, we have like a plan to get to those in the second and third month. And then we just kind of iterate off of that going forward. And then there's always like new content that they're working on if they do have that ability. And then we kind of move that into the mix and always try to like pull in the data to inform what we do for new content.
Your title has the word paid in it. Like, do you have like a beginner's recipe for how much they can expect to throw down in the first month or 3, right? I mean, it's hard to get results until things kind of sit and spin for a while, right?
Yeah. So we have like a timeline of 3 months before we can really like know what's going on. So like we'll get initial data in the first month, we'll make optimizations. The second month kind of gives a little bit more clear of a picture. And by month 3, we really should be kind of cooking and knowing where the like baseline CPAs are. There's things you can do in the system to try to control those a little bit more from a cost standpoint. But really like you need that 3 months. So there's that timeline. And then we basically need to be aligned with them on like the content plan on like what we're going to be testing, how much assets that they're going to need to kind of shoot over if they do have that. And that's kind of the basics.
And then after 3 months, they hang on and what are they likely to see if everything is moving the way you're hoping it is?
So it depends on what their real goals are. So if they're looking for growth, like what we really try to do is establish that baseline KPI, meaning usually the cost per acquisition or an ROI goal. And if we're around that goal, then we can try to like push spend. So if we're like a little bit below or like below the ROI goal or the CPA is just a little bit too high, our real goal after that month 3 is just to continue to stabilize and bring that CPA down. But usually clients are looking to grow. So by month 3, if we're at that like KPI goal that they're looking for, they'll end up pushing spend.
Tell me about KPIs that you're getting for your people.
Yeah. So
like that is its own thing, right? It's not about selling something, right? It's a lot of awareness. And we're going to talk about the Telly Awards in a little bit here, so we can actually define some of that, right? But how do you define what the client's KPI is, and do they always know what that is?
So they definitely don't always know, but they usually, and it kind of can fluctuate between their business goals and what's in the platform itself. So you can have like multiple platforms that you're advertising on, and they all come together to kind of achieve that goal. So like, for example, with paid social, we're looking at one component of a bigger, omni-channel marketing campaign. So sometimes they'll come to us and say, we want to sell this many units over this period of time. And so that would mean like from this platform, we need to get like 75%. And then we can calculate, all right, you're going to be spending this much. It costs the ROI goal is this. So we need to get a CPA of X in order for you to make that goal. So we can kind of back into it. But sometimes they have very clear goals where they're just like, we need to hit this number in order to maintain profitability. And that's what we're working towards.
You're still you've been in business for a while, right? So things are working. You guys are clearly know what you're doing. Let's one of my goals here was to actually run through a strategy that you've done that worked, and you mentioned the Telly Awards as being one of your better clients, right? So maybe can you just tell me what the Telly Awards is to you guys, and how long you've been working with them, and then where you started, and then we're going to run through some actual ads that you guys have been putting together, right?
Yeah, so the Telly Awards is an award that's been around for a long time, and it's mainly for video across multiple screens. So it really kind of ended up starting with like TV ads, and now it's like gone to any platform you can think of or medium that you can think of. So it's really like rewarding people for their time and effort, giving them the recognition that they deserve for their hard work. And we've been working with them for like 3 years now.
So what did they, how did they find you, or did you find them?
So they found us. One of the clients I mentioned, Time Hop, their CEO referred us to the CEO of the Telly Awards. And, they had us pitch them. They were looking for someone to come on kind of as like a short-term thing. And that ended up being a very long-term thing. And we ended up working with some other properties that they have.
Now, I like to think that like most service-oriented businesses are problem solvers. So what was the Telly Awards problem, and how have you guys been solving that for them?
Yeah, so they were basically a little bit stagnant on growth. So their main thing, and they look at this year over year, they're just trying to grow every single year. So we were basically looking at trying to grow and maintain some of their CPA goals. And basically the main thing was to get like 15% growth in the first year.
And have you done that? How are we doing?
Yeah, we were able to achieve that, and we've done really well year over year with them.
Tell me about, it looks like you've got, you sent me a bunch of clips here. Let's start with, did you want to look at the Janae one? Was that the one?
So I think maybe let's try looking at some of the ones that were before. So what we did was when we first started, we were kind of working with the assets that they had, because we kind of came in the middle of the year. So we kind of were just like working with what they had, and there were really a lot of focus on the actual trophy itself, or the award itself. There were some assets that were related to like bumper reels is what we call them. And that's showing like highlights of work that's been done and entered into the competition. And then also just different variations on those trophies. In winners, highlighting the winners that are like holding the trophy, for example. So it was kind of limited, but they were all really good assets.
I've got this one with it's called Colors, I think. Colors Change. Is that,
yep.
And there's no sound. So we've got the trophy spinning around, and then different colors. And where was this in the process? That's early on, you said? Or
yeah, it was early on. So basically this was one of their kind of like legacy assets. And really what it did was it was a kind of like a scroll stopping, thumb stopping asset where you could see the colors, you could see the trophy spinning. And it definitely worked really well. But it just kind of, when we got to year 2, it just kind of petered off a little bit. So we do have to introduce some other things. But it did kind of perform really well out of the gate.
And then we have this other one here. I think this is the one with the, it says the bumper.
Yep. So that one's like just highlighting different work across the spectrum, from TV ads to paid social ads, to display advertising, to stuff that's on just websites. So they were kind of cutting it really quickly, and it was really good. So it was like showing different things, and there was like really good music behind the scenes, and you could really see like, all right, this is catching your attention. and it is showing you what this is really for and who it's for.
Now, the first thing I noticed there that it was horizontal. So where did you run that? And it was longer than what I would see in your average reel, right? Or
Yeah. So basically, we did have a vertical version so that we could get into stories, but it was longer than normal. So what we do is we try to stay within like 15 seconds, but some of the assets are so good that we're able to like extend them to 30 seconds. And really, like what we're looking for is if they stay on for that 30 seconds, they are really high intent. There isn't like there is a usual guideline on how long you want to have some of these ads go for, but you really can play with it. And especially if it's a great asset and you're looking for them to kind of get into the funnel and show some higher intent, you can do a little bit longer versions.
And so tell me a little bit about how you know that they're staying on that long, and how many people saw it initially, or how many people did you feed it to? And then how was that sort of narrowed down? Do you have any numbers or rough stats on as the funnel gets a little narrower? Well, I mean, I think our ultimate goal here is to refine our audience, right? We want to find those really highly motivated people who are in the Telly's case, I imagine, are going to actually enter the contest, right?
Yeah. So we get basically like when you're in the platform, you get average watch times. So we can see like how much of a percentage of the video that they're watching. And so we can see like, all right, this is getting some really good click-through rates to start. So it's grabbing attention, and then they're getting through to at least the majority of the video. So we do know that it's like a good asset and that it's working. Now, the most important part is really the back end numbers. So what we were looking at is people starting an entry in what we call prospecting or new audiences, people who are purchasing and retargeting. We had this asset in both areas. So really like we were looking at those initial indicators, meaning click-through rate and average watch time, but we were also looking at the back end numbers. So this was getting really good click-through rate and getting people to the site, but it wasn't necessarily like converting as well.
And where are they? Is this on Meta, or where are people looking at this stuff?
This was on Meta, and it was in like the feed. It was on Instagram and Facebook. It was in the feeds and stories and reels. So it was kind of blanketed across the space. And we would let it run for, weeks to make sure that we had like statistically significant data, because this is running with other ads. So that's one of the big dichotomies you get into, is just like you need to get enough data on these ads, and Meta can end up like forcing spend to an ad that's doing really well, but that means that you're limited on spends for some of these other ads. So you have to run it longer to be able to really tell. So, we had like, hundreds of thousands of impressions on it to make sure that we had a statistically significant data set, and we needed a pretty high amount of spend on it.
Right. And so on that hundreds of thousands of impressions, how did that get narrowed down, or what was the next phase after you send it out in that really broad?
So basically you have it across multiple audiences. And so you're trying to turn it off where it's not working and leave it on where it is. So we kind of like, we would get some information from one audience that said like, maybe this isn't the best asset, but another audience it would be doing really well in. So we would push it in that one. Yeah. So that's kind of how we operated and how we optimize.
Right. So let's look at some of these other ones. This other one we have is, it's square, so we're changing shape at this point, and it looks like we just have some text that pops up and a slick-looking audience or office, and then the Telly Award is actually there. And where did that go? And I mean, that seems really simple. What did simple do for you?
So it really let us like kind of focus on the trophy and imagining like them having it on their desk, right? So it was trying to kind of visualize them as a winner. And where they would put it. And then we were able to kind of throw that text on so they could kind of see some of the main benefits of entering and winning the contest. So the simplicity of it really, it did do well. All these did well. And I think the main point that we're going to get to is like, these did well in year one, and then we rolled them over to year two, and then they kind of dropped off when we had these other assets come in. So we had to bring in other assets because they just didn't perform as well year over year. Yeah, so I think the Janae one was kind of the big game changer.
Okay. So where are we at this point in your relationship with the Tellys? And then we start to transition into this more engaging content, right? You're working with them 2 years at this point?
Yeah, so we're in year two, and we've all like, this was an asset that we've been like asking for a while, and it is hard to put together just because you have to get a producer to come in and sit down and actually like talk about the Tellys. So it wasn't an easy asset to get, but once we got it, we were really pushing to get other variations too, but this was the one that really crushed it. So,
so you described the concept for them, and after a while they got up to speed and were able to execute this so that you could turn it into something, right? And
yeah, exactly.
And I recognize Janae here from the actual Tellys. I don't know who actually did the shooting, but let's just run it so we can let the audience see it, and then I want you to tell me where it went and what great things it did for us.
Hi, I'm Janae Johnson, and I'm a producer for the Telly Awards. The final entry deadline is now. If you've made work and branded content, television or online shows and series, social videos, non-broadcast, commercial and marketing, we want to see your work. So please, get to the website, enter, and best of luck.
Great. And was that, let's see, it's 26 seconds long. Immediately, my first reaction is I like Janae. She seems authentic. I also feel like maybe unlike the desk one, that she seems approachable. I could see myself hanging out with Janae, and maybe I'm not a filmmaker in Hollywood, but I'm a filmmaker in Kentucky, and right? I don't know.
Yeah. So it really was the authenticity of it. So like being able to talk to the award and like give the details behind it was also the kind of second component, but the real big win was just how like authentic and personal she was. So I think if you look at the like components of it, the first thing that I would kind of focus on is like her calling out the final entry deadline. So she calls out like saying the final entry deadline is going to be coming up soon. So it's creating some of this like urgency. And then it goes into exactly who is available for this award, right? So it kind of narrows your scope. And that's a big part of this, is to talk directly to your, ideal customer or your ideal audience. So she goes right into that saying like, if you've done branded content in these areas, then you're perfect for this. And then finally kind of shows what the actual deadline is again. So and calls to action is a really important part of that too. So
did you guys have thought process on what she should be wearing? I mean, she's wearing like that beanie, like she's not in a suit. I think the word authenticity is spot on, but is that more her, or did you guys kind of help?
No, that is all her. So that's all like, her personality, and that really was a big part of it. So we tried to just come up with a concept, and that's like when we're working with a team like the Telly Awards, where they are just so amazing at coming up with like high quality content. We can kind of give them just the guidelines, and then they're able to kind of go execute. Yeah, so that all of these are going to be meta ads. So they ran on Facebook and Instagram, and it ran across again like most of our audiences, because we did kind of test it in a few audiences to start, but we knew it'd be a good asset, so we rolled it out pretty quickly. And we saw like basically, if you look at the results, it was the top ad for not just like the final entry deadline, but the extended entry deadline. So it really crushed it.
Do you have any rough numbers or examples of how we know that did so well, and like compared to some of the other ones? Not to put you on the spot, but like
I did pull this up. So if you look at the number of like basically the ROI on that ad was about 14. So that was incredible, and it created just an insane amount of volume from like the initial KPI that we were looking at for people starting an entry to purchases. It was by far and away the most. So that happened in, this final entry deadline. And then it also was the top performer in the extended entry deadline. So it really performed across the entire campaign, from different timelines to different components of the funnel, and across different platforms. So like once we got that in, we started seeing like the cost go down, the ROI go up, and it really was like a big component of it. And Meta like kind of picked up on that and started spending a lot behind it. So we kind of optimized to push spend even more towards it too.
So then you have an ad like that's working, and then what? You have to like do it again? Is that the goal, or chase that idea and up that game one more time, or?
Exactly. So we don't unfortunately have like all the other assets that we did for variations on it, but basically we had like judges come in and do the exact same thing. And we had the team kind of talk and do different cuts of different people talking. So it was really like this, the concept really was direct to camera. So that was the variations that we were able to work on. No matter who was involved, it was always like people that were directly related to it, involved in it, and were able to like talk to the like key audience and what the benefits are of entering it.
Then we have a couple of user generated spots here. Let's watch this unboxing one.
Yep.
And tell me where that, let's watch it for a sec.
Oh my God.
So that wouldn't have happened without you. So I just wanted to say thank you, and that's for you.
Now, I mean that's a 15-second classic UGC. How did that one come about? Like, did somebody submit that, or did you suggest that as a concept, or?
Yeah, so we like the two things that we were really pushing were UGC and having that direct to camera. So the UGC component, we were asking them to like go and reach out to people who had won and who had done basically their own film for it, right? Where they posted it on their, either agency page or in-house page. And basically you just got permission to be able to use it. And most people are very open to it. They're very down to do it. So we kind of just had them do like send out feelers. And they got a ton of response from it. So this is one of the like top ones where it's really like it cuts quick. It's really highlighting like the unboxing and like how it feels to like open up the trophy and to be that winner. So that was like kind of along the same timeline as like the direct to camera. It didn't do as well as the direct to camera, but it was like a big component in upping kind of the game from, focusing on the trophy. And again, these didn't like the ones that we went over before didn't completely get phased out. They played their role. Some of them were more directly related to retargeting, but this one was one of those where you could really put it anywhere in the funnel along with the direct to camera, because it kind of was able to tell different stories.
I mean, it's so short. People can relate to something that short, you think?
Yeah, they can't. So the main thing is that feeling when you're unboxing it and seeing that you're a winner. So like if you can connect to that really easily. So it's a different type of authenticity, but it creates like a different emotion, right? It's about putting yourself in the shoes of a winner as opposed to really educating the audience about what this is for and really trying to talk directly to who should be entering this.
Yeah, I mean, it feels in some ways parallel to that desk one, except this is actually putting the point of view into that actual user, right? Like the desk, I was imagining myself as an exec in Hollywood, and there's my fancy trophy, and this one here I am in the shop, and suddenly this package shows up, and that feels more authentic than the other one for sure, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then we had this other one, which I hear did really well too. Let's look at. Now, I actually saw that one, so that means it did well enough to get to my feed, I think, right?
That's a good sign. So that one was like more of the emotional side where they're like not necessarily unboxing, but like picking it up, and it's not as like CapCutty where it's like cutting to different scenes in a little bit like shorter of a film. It's more like showing their reaction to opening it and getting more of that emotional feel. So both of those two, the UGC ones, like they did well from like an efficiency standpoint. They didn't get the same volume as the Janae asset, but they still did really well and they played their role.
That one's a little more sophisticated in its execution. I mean, there's the guy walks out the door, but then you've got the lights and the spinny stuff. You have music that's, is that like the combination of all those things coming together, or did you guys produce that in-house in your team, or is that on the Telly's team?
So that was the Telly's team, and that was one of those feelers they put out. So that was them just like trying to get some people that they knew were winners to film something, and some of them already had this filmed and they had posted it and they found it because they can tag like the Telly Awards, and some of the team will go and research like who on their Instagram has tagged them, and then they're able to find it that way. So it was a winner, but it was through the Telly's like kind of feelers that we got it.
Tell me a little bit about your relationship with the client at this point. Like, how do you come to them and say, hey, I think we need to up the game here? Or is it, I would imagine being more transparent about what's not working and where you want to be is maybe hard to do, but pretty crucial to the process, right?
Yeah. So it comes back to capacity, and this goes across the spectrum, but for this specific client, like, we basically were aware that it was going to be hard to get these assets like quickly. They needed to plan the shoots. They needed to get the people involved. They needed to get scripts to some extent, talking points. So we were kind of just patient. So we knew that like from the very beginning that this was on the docket. We just didn't necessarily know when it was going to be done. So basically we would just kind of say, all right, we still have some really good assets. We're a little bit behind pace on like volume, because we do have like year over year comparisons, and we're looking at it like even every day. So like we'll know if we're like behind a little bit, and then that can kind of jumpstart a little bit of urgency on getting some of these assets together. So what was nice is once they got all the planning done, like we got a quick succession of a lot of these assets done. So it was really just like being understanding of where they're at in their kind of capacity, how much time they really need, and then trying to kind of let the data tell them if we need to push this a little bit more.
And so far, is the Telly's happy with what you guys have done? It sounds like they are.
Yes, I think they are happy right now. And I got to give them I have to give them huge credit because we're working with the assets that they give us, and they're willing to listen to us. They're willing to get it into action, even if it takes a second to like kind of get it together and actually develop the assets. It really is like a team effort. So we're not like executing in at least this situation where we're not coming up with the assets, but we're just really kind of coming up with the concepts and trying to make sure they know what the priorities are.
Right. When you first start working with a client, do you have a pitch deck that talks about projections, or if ideal things happen, how do they get on board with your process?
They come to us with like their goals to start, and then we kind of backtrack out from there. So we'll say like, we need to get this amount of volume in this period of time. And with the Telly specifically, it's really a game to the end of each of the phases or the entry periods. So we're like scaling spend up as we get closer to the end of that time. And at the very beginning, like people aren't entering into in like submitting awards. They're usually like starting it. They're trying to get their submission together. So like we're having to optimize on these other KPIs that are like higher in the funnel. And then that kind of tells us if we're getting enough people into it. And we do get some people like submitting the entries early on. And then we kind of have to transition and get more volume on the back end as we get closer to each of the deadlines. So really it's less of like showing them like, these are the exact numbers that you can expect. It's more of like, here's our game plan on how we're going to increase spend as we get closer to these deadlines. What KPIs are we going to be focusing on to determine if we're going in the right direction, and those sort of things. And they do have a really sophisticated, business intelligence, business analyst side of this, where they are able to like look at Tableau reports and tell us like back-end information that's not necessarily what we're seeing in the platform itself.
Do you, one of the things that we're doing is actually cutting different kinds of content, or shooting a lot and using that to cut a lot of different kind of content so that we can meet the audience where they are at that particular moment. Are you doing, like, once somebody is really engaging with one of your spots, I imagine you're feeding them more spots after that? And is that a different ad than the first thing they're seeing?
Yeah. So basically, if you're talking more of like a funnel level, are you kind of referring?
Yeah, right. I mean, different layers of content. So we do this thing, we call it ACDC. So it's awareness, consideration, and decision. And the awareness, basically, we're shooting out to 100,000 people. And out of 100,000 people, the people that engage with that, they're a little bit interested. So we've hooked them, right, with our pixels and whatnot. And then they get the next phase, which is just a little bit more focused on the brand or what have you. And then at the end of the day, you're showing them that decision stage stuff, which is really focused on what the brand has to offer. And it's, interesting enough, that's the most expensive stuff. So you want to spend that money wisely, right?
Yeah.
But you're showing those folks a different kind of content that the first people have no idea what you were talking about, right?
Yeah.
Do you have an equivalent of that kind of game with what you're doing?
Yeah. So basically what we do is we have like you mentioned, like the pixel. So what we like to do to start is have the assets go everywhere. So we'll have them in prospecting and in retargeting and see what the data tells us. And usually there's a pretty like clear dichotomy between different assets. And we'll start seeing, like, for example, the Janae asset like did amazing in prospecting. It even did well in retargeting. But we would see, for example, like there's some assets that were just like single image and weren't even video assets that were doing really well in retargeting because they had gone through the funnel and they'd known like what the Telly Awards is about. And really what we're trying to focus on is making sure they have urgency at the bottom of the funnel to submit. Now, other assets that did really well at the bottom of the funnel were like the unboxing one too. So this UGC stuff, like if they can imagine themselves like opening up the unboxing, and that's kind of a standard play in the industry, is like having unboxing at the bottom of the funnel. So yeah, we would definitely try to like let the data tell us, but then we'd have different assets that did go to different parts of the funnel.
Yeah, it seems like my takeaway from this whole conversation is authenticity is king. Yeah. I spent 25 years as a photojournalist before I started doing video work. And I feel like that is what I spent a lot of time doing really well, getting people to tell their story in a way that nobody else could, right? And it sounds like you're suggesting that people really respond to that.
They definitely do. If you're not like authentic and can like get the point across to, number one, who your audience is, because you like are submitting, like you're sending this out with Meta and any paid social platform, with the exception of some audience targeting, to a wide array of people, right? So you need to be able to, one, tell an authentic story that's going to capture people's attention, get them to convert, and kind of weed out the other people that aren't going to be interested in that product or service that you're selling. So a lot of this is making sure that you can kind of talk to that key audience.
Right. And getting them to wherever they are in their consuming journey, that they're relating to that particular person or spot at that particular time, right? Is that, like I heard you say a couple of times, it's like you could see yourself be that person or entering that award for the Tellys because that image or that voice resonated with me. Do you think that there is, you said that sometimes you struggle with getting a higher quality content, and where does that sort of meet with the authenticity? Maybe there's like a balance point where, even if production is horrible, then it's really still not going to do that well, right? I mean, we need to have some layer of production value, right? And
yeah, definitely. I mean, so the best way I can put this is you want to test everything. Like, you want to go through as many assets as you can with intentionality. So if you're looking at highly produced assets, those do go a long way. But you can also get assets that are a lot more like some of the UGC unboxing doesn't have to be pretty. It could be like someone holding up a phone talking to a camera. But like usually what we do see is some of these highly produced assets do usually perform better. So you want to have a mix, and you want to make sure that you're not like completely, leaving these highly produced assets to the side. And that's like one of the biggest like discussion points and kind of back and forth we have with clients, is convincing them to come up with some of this highly produced stuff that they know they're going to spend a lot of money on. And we need to come up with a plan that shows them that we're going to be able to like repurpose these assets, use them in a like wide variety of ways. So like when you're going to them and saying, I want you to invest in this highly produced asset, you have to have a plan. You have to have like way more than just like, this needs to look good. It needs to have like the authenticity that you talked about, and really concrete calls to actions. So that's like the kind of the big dichotomy, is like, if you have a highly produced assets, you have to really think about how you're going to be using them for paid social and how you're going to get people to convert.
Sounds like you got a pretty high standard, Joe. Like, you want it all. You want quality, authenticity, and all sorts of results. So I think that's probably the winning ticket and why you guys are doing so great. Joe, I want to thank you for being on the show today. And I prepared you for this. It is your job to leave our audience with a golden nugget of information. What do you have for our folks to chew on at home?
Yeah. So for people who are kind of just starting out with this, or just trying to improve their paid social campaigns, I'm going to leave you with something to do and something not to do. So starting with the what not to do, I would say just try not to overcomplicate things. Really just try to focus on like, what is the compelling story that you're going to be telling, and also like, what are the pain points and solutions that you're going to be having to talk to. So really focusing on the customer avatar and just trying to come up with like 4 to 6 assets to start that are different from each other and that are really going to position the product or service in the best light possible. So don't, for example, start with like 20 different variations with like 5 of them just being different color changes. You really want different assets, and you just want to focus on trying to get as good of assets as you can. Now, that doesn't mean you can't sprinkle in some that are lower like time and effort. And that is part of like the conundrum, is having some assets that you're going to be putting a lot of time into, but you just don't want to overcomplicate things. You don't want to come up with 20 assets to start. You want to focus on stuff that you think is going to work, and then iterate off of that. And then for the thing to do, I would say, if you are limited with your client on assets, I would say just try to get your hands dirty. So go and make the ad yourself, treat it like a school project, have fun with it. And then, if you show your client that it's working and that you're willing to put yourself out there in those scenarios, like, they'll be able to see like, this asset works. We want to have our people that are in the team and at the company doing these assets too. And it can kind of jumpstart them into doing it themselves.
And there you have it, guys. Joe Wolf, head of paid social at Optidge. Joe, thanks so much for being on the show. Fellow curious creatives out there, we'll see you next time. Thanks again.